Enterprise Perspectives, a show where we're interviewing executives of size enterprises for their perspective on various topics. We're here to celebrate, support, and inform people involved with the small and medium-sized enterprise environment. I'm Drew Harris, Professor of Management at Central Connecticut State University. My co-host is Dr. Kostov Misra, the Associate Dean at Central Connecticut State. And today our guest is Peter Mirabello. He is the CEO of Metal Finishing Technologies in Bristol, Connecticut, and he's a CCSU alum. Pete, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your firm?
Metal Finishing Technologies, founded in the late 40s, so we're a little over years old, and we effectively try and make metal perform better. We can put coatings on metal to make them conduct electricity better, resist corrosion, maybe for the automotive industry, or put certain metals on top of the base material that will resist heat and go into airplanes, for aircraft. But we also have the ability to also take some materials that have been in the field for overhaul, bring them back to their parent material without impacting the parent material, so they can be inspected, repaired, and returned to service. So that's probably a pretty good overview. But again, the name is as it implies, metal finishings, many different types of metal finishing technologies. And the last piece, probably to put it in a little clearer prism or perspective, is we work in the aerospace markets, the automotive markets, and medical primarily. We'll support those three. And there's a couple burgeoning industries we're looking at going forward, but right now it's those three.
How big is your firm in terms of employees? And
we have a 70,000 square foot facility. We have about 60 employees at the moment. And we're just on the verge of probably another growth spurt. But right now, those would be the dimensions.
Great.
Thank you, Pete. So when did you guys found this company?
So the company was founded in 1947. It's had a very good history. I purchased it in 2011, just coming out of the last downturn in the market. It was in disrepair. The folks that had run it and had a good life and a really good business just sort of timed out, and it was kind of caught in between, almost in a bit of limbo. When I got here in 2011, it was really in need of a kind of a turnaround activity. But I've been here since April of 2011.
Good. And what is your role in the company? That means how that changed over the time.
Oh, sure. I think in the beginning, I just kind of rolled up my sleeves and said, what do we have here? I mean, the inventory was really, what's the status of the equipment? What's the status of the people who are here? Where do we stand in terms of the permits with the local agencies? And then we got to the customer base. And over time, I found that the folks that had run it did a really good job. And there was a pretty good platform in place. It might have gotten a little dusty because, again, they had timed out about 6 or 7 years before I purchased it. And that was the first piece. And then little by little, you start to understand what market you're in. You start to orientate what our capabilities are, what we were lacking. You start to teach, you start to attract some good people and install it. So there was a lot of hands-on. The metaphor I used when I first got here is I'd say my sleeves are rolled up because the heat's on. When it's going well, you guys can run it and that'll be just fine. So there was a lot of hands-on, a lot of mentoring, and a lot of coaching. Now it's come forward. We've got a terrific group of leaders and managers here, and I can work on more of the strategic things now. And I think so I've morphed sort of from the president and CEO to the CEO and chairman, if you will, and kind of have a head up and see what's next and, how we can best serve the market. So it's evolved over time. But in the beginning, really, it was kind of all hands on deck.
So Pete, this series we're starting with looking at, and you bought the firm after the last sort of crisis that we had. So could you just walk us through like when you first became aware that this COVID-19 was going to be a problem, and what did you do in the very early days to prepare your firm for this?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things you try and do as a business leader is you always want to just keep your pulse on what's happening in terms of the markets, what's happening political in terms of elections, both local and national. And throughout the course of that, we had an idea that this was coming along. But in the early stages, I don't know that anybody really saw how much it was just going to stop the whole economy in its tracks. But we found out fairly quickly. And there's two things that need to have happen. We needed to interpret that essential business rule. And we found out because of our medical, because of our transportation and our aerospace and defense, we became essential, which was okay. Now we have to go to work. But then the next step is you say, what do we do to make sure that we don't allow the plant, anybody in the plant, to get this? And so you came up with a continuity plan. So I'm thinking really before we reacted probably real time when the state did. You're aware of it, but we're waiting for some guidance. Once we did, once we knew we needed to come to work, then we knew we had an obligation not only to the customers and the end users and all the first responders, but also to the people that worked here and their families. And from there, we developed a continuity plan, or I should say the leadership team did. And they did what I thought was a really good job. If I can, I'll just give you a couple examples. It's just some fundamental thinking. Let's stagger the shifts so not everybody's in the facility at the same time. Let's have non-essential people. Let's get them laptops and let them work from home, including myself, which I did. And it was really hard to do to stay away, but we worked remotely. And then we said no vendors in the building. And then we would go in and we'd look at all the high traffic, high touch areas, and we would sanitize those about every 3 years. And you get the idea that we were aware. The folks that we had here were aided by the fact that there became such a national awareness that they knew it wasn't us trying to instill something that wasn't natural. So our continuity plan, the leadership, and a reminder that we thought, the folks were important and keeping them safe was first and foremost. I'll give you an example. We had somebody on the staff who lost a family member in San Francisco. And they flew out when this thing was happening. So I'm talking probably 5-6 weeks ago. We said, when you come back, stay home 2 weeks, self-quarantine. But I wasn't around anybody. I feel good. We said, we know, but we just think it's better to err on the side of caution. So that was learning about it, starting to put continuity in place. And then ultimately, the CARES Act was really there. There's a lot of dialogue about who's using it, who's exploiting it. We just said, look, we should have this in the event we need to bridge. We know the future's bright. We don't know what the interim's going to be. So that would have been the third thing that we did, is install that to make sure that we could keep everybody employed. Our goal was to keep this team together, and so far so good. So I would think those would be the three things that we did to get us where we are today, which is not necessarily out of the woods. None of us are, but hopefully we're closer. When they say you go into the woods and you only have to go halfway and then you're starting to go out of the woods, well, we're kind of hoping that we're past the halfway point.
If you haven't been in these woods before, you don't know where halfway is.
No, you really, really don't. It's an enigma, and it's such a good point, Dr. Harris. As business leaders, it's our job to do with ups and downs in markets, natural disasters, storms, tornadoes, power getting knocked out, right? This is a completely new one, but it's within the context of it's going to have an impact on the market like anything else does. But yeah, there's a certain definite uncertainty about how long and when, and is there going to be a repercussion that, it just forces you obviously to stay on your toes.
Thank you. You bring out a interesting point. The pandemic actually has stimulated changes in government action, logistics, and supply chain, and of course the customer behavior. What is the current state of your business? Like, how have you adapted to this new reality?
Yeah, one is you just got to communicate with your customers. You got to understand where your needs are. We've lost a little bit of business temporarily because we've had customers that have pivoted their facility just into support the medical sort of arms race that's been going on. So that's been part of it. The disruption hasn't been too bad for us. Otherwise, there's been a little bit of a softening. But again, it allows us with the CARES Act to keep the team together, maybe work on some projects we hadn't gotten to. And, like any business, you just try and make smart decisions as you go. So the disruption hasn't been dramatic or emphatic in that it stopped us, but you definitely feel it, and it may put some projects on hold, from a CapEx standpoint. And then it's mostly talking to the vendors, right? It's mostly talking, and literally now what we do, it's making sure the vendors can give us hand sanitizers, right? That's part of the delivery, the 5-gallon bucket, you know, and, you know, you learn a lot about a team when they're under a little bit of pressure. And I tell you, I'm really pleased with the group here, right? It had nothing to do with me. It's a group of people and the leaders that are in there have done a nice job, really kind of stepping up and making it a place where everybody feels comfortable to come to work. And then also just pleasing that we can continue to still work during this time. So, you know, but it's there. It's the thing in the room that you can't fully sense, but you just know it's there, you know, from many different angles. You know, everybody's been touched by this.
Pete,
Thank you.
you said that you have a team. When we've asked people and looked at the literature, I have a MBA class that pivoted and we're studying leadership in crisis. You know, a lot of people don't appreciate how important your foundation is with your team. So, I mean, that you have a team that's was able to step up and communicate and be clear sounds really great. Are there other things that you can think about? I mean, we know there are firms that have cash in the bank and who don't. You talked about the CARES. Are there other things that were in the nature of how your business was set up that you think is helping you weather this storm?
Yeah, listen, I think that's a great point. You know, there's a metaphor that says the people that are the most vulnerable to this very, very bad virus are the ones that already have sort of a pre-existing condition or a pre-existing vulnerability. And you see that in the business world as well. When you look at the bailouts, and we don't need to, there's enough publicity out there that we don't need to give examples, but some are a lot more vulnerable because they were already struggling. You know, we always pay attention to the ratio of debt we have to EBITDA, you know, and the ratios are out there. The banks are 3, the private equities maybe 4. We stayed well under that. We understood that we had an ability to withstand it for a while. So that gave us, you know, a little bit of comfort. Obviously, you don't want to just give it all away and wind up, you know, with everything empty. But yeah, you know, it's one of those things where you try and you hope as a business that you're building a solid foundation. You're building really a platform. You're building something that you want to last for 20 years. And, you know, this is some good feedback as to how that's going. And with a good team in place, a committed team in place, a complementary team, the culture that we really strive to get here, which is first and foremost the value system, coupled by what our purpose is, coupled by a performance. And again, we say it's great if you have good values, and I like the values that we've developed. I like our core purpose, but if you don't have a performance component, then it's all kind of make believe. If you and we kind of had these things in place, and I don't know if it was happenstance or luck, but it has allowed us to kind of stay calm in the middle of this, knowing that there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of vigilance that needs to happen. But, you know, having a good balance sheet, having a good team, understanding roles, having everybody on the same page, and letting everybody know that they matter well before this, that, you know, those things have to have a positive impact of some. And mostly I just stay out of the way. It's probably the smartest thing we ever did.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, at some point of time, you talked about your employees. Just to give you an example of an employee who came from San Francisco, and then how you handle that. It's kind of related to this. What have you done with regards to your employee? Have you been able to retain your staff, or you had to fire people, or have to reduce the hours? How you're handling it?
No, again, our goal was to keep this team together, you know, because look, when we looked at the CARES Act, there was something about it that said inherently, they're kind of saying, why don't you be the unemployment bureau, except they don't have to lose their job and apply for it when it's over. And I think that's what they did to come in here with that money. And our goal has been to keep the group together. Anybody that was at all compromised could go home with the safety that they can just feel better and that there wasn't any, you know, disrupt in that. And that was the tack. So no, we haven't laid anybody off. And, you know, we're really going to work real hard. Look, there's a certain component to this which if it gets to the point where you actually have to think about laying off or furloughing people, I think this thing has really reached a real fevered pitch. And I only say that not for the folks that have had to do that, but being considered an essential business and being asked to work through it to try and keep the infrastructure going. So no, our goal was to do just that. And with the CARES money, we looked at it and said, look, if that can help us bridge it, fantastic. And if it's all said and done and they say, what's ever left over, send it back, we'll send it back. This has a very deliberate purpose. I don't look at this as a money-making opportunity. I look at it as a bridge just to get us to what we think is going to happen in the second half of the year. So, and again, I tip my hat to the leaders of this company. And there's a few people that really have that transpire, and I'm here just to give them support and direction. But no, we haven't laid anybody off, nor do we, nor do we intend to. But some of that will be out of our hands. But I think, my sense is I think things are going to kind of slowly come back to normal, and we might be able to weather this storm.
Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, that's great. We're early in our series, and so you're the first guest that we've had who's leading an essential industry. And I'm kind of curious about first how you found out, or how who communicated that you're essential, you have permission, or you're required to go to work. And then you mentioned vendors. Are your vendors now being declared essential because you're essential?
Yeah, I don't know which comes first in those two, Dr. Harris. When it first came out and they said we're going to shut down, but we knew our customers weren't going to shut down, we did like everybody else did. We went and just pursued the information. And there was a lot of stuff coming out of the DECD. There's a tremendous group in the state called the Aircraft Component Manufacturers that had some literature. And then we were also paying attention to what the governor was saying. And after a while, we identified ourselves. And then what was interesting is some of our bigger vendors would send us notes saying, we are an essential business. We are hoping and expecting you're going to stay in business as well. So it was really just, maybe the benefit of having a good dialogue with our customers, and then also really just, trying to say, look, maybe we should go find the answer for ourselves as to what we're supposed to do and how it's going to work. So really, that's the way it evolved versus one afternoon we said, boom, here we go, because it hit us like everybody else when they first said we're shutting everything down. It was a little surreal.
Now, did you send letters to your vendors saying, well, now we're essential, can you behave as if you're essential?
Yeah, even better than that. We've got pretty good relationships with our critical vendors, so it's almost like a real-time discussion. So we all stayed on the same page. And again, we had some that would bring in certain chemicals and say, look, I'm going to put 2 5-gallon jugs of the hand sanitizer in there along with the other things you need. We took a quick inventory to figure out where might be the long lead time items. We took a look at the inventories that may be coming from out of the country, which may have a harder time to get into the country. And again, it was, that point, at some point at the DNA level of those transactions, it's really a business transaction, regardless of what's driving it. And it's the way we looked at it.
Great.
Thank you. So this is interesting because you're not only handling the business, you're also handling your family. And necessarily now, since this recent changes in our life, we have to work from our home. So how you're maintaining your boundaries between families and work?
I just decide that I'm always like at the fourth choice, and it seems to work out just fine. Everyone else does. Listen, we work together, and it's funny that you say it. I'm at a point in my life where some of the kids are either in university or out of school, but they're still back because it's the right place to work it out. And I don't think we've ever sacrificed one for the other. So you get it to fit. It's just about a responsibility. When it comes time to work and to be where you need to be, we do that, and you support them. And one of my daughters, I remember saying I was going to see her maybe 10 days this year, right? Because of the age she was, she'll come in for the holidays and that's and that. She's been home for 7 weeks. I mean, it's been a delight. And you can't say that anything is really good from any of this, because underneath it, a lot of people are suffering, and it's been really, really difficult. And a lot of people have really been put to the test in their careers, the healthcare workers and things like that. But look, the fact that we sat and had more dinners together and were able to talk collectively about some of the things that were important to us has not necessarily been a bad thing. So, it's the same thing. If everybody cares about each other, everybody respects each other, and we're able to make it work that way. So, so far so good. Now, look, you can ask them; they may have a different answer, but I'm going with that. I'm going with that one.
As someone who also has two daughters at home from college that we were seeing less and less of, and now we're seeing every day, I understand that, and I think it certainly has made us feel more comfortable in our household. So, I just wanted to summarize the points that I think we heard, and then give you a chance to say anything as a last thing. But so you're in an industry that was, your customers were declared essential, aerospace, therefore you're essential, and a lot of your suppliers are essential. You were monitoring this early. I guess you were hearing both from the news, but I'm guessing from your customer base that things were going to change. You followed the government directives. Because you had a strong team, a strong balance sheet, strong cash flows, that was like your emergency preparedness plan. And that you've been able to keep your workers, you've changed some work flow and scheduling so that people are safe. That now I'm curious. One of the things that have you had any cases in your plant yet, and has everybody stayed healthy?
Everybody has stayed healthy. We had a couple employees that would call us and say, listen, I had a little bit of a fever last night. We say, good, stay home. And if it gets worse, go get checked. Don't come back for 2 weeks. And so we haven't had any in the building that we paid attention to. And again, we took a wide latitude to anybody that wasn't feeling good. And at the same time, we saw a lot of people really putting in some tremendous efforts, that we also made sure that some of the leaders would come in and relieve them. But so far, so good. But I my sense is we're not out of the woods. Again, there's too much unknown about this, but the plan and the things that we put in place so far, so good. But again, it's
Too early.
It's just too early. Yeah, well said.
Any final words for your counterparts and other organizations who thoughts or insights that you've had that we haven't asked you about?
I think the reality is that as leaders, you're always getting situations where you're never going to have all the information. You collect as much as you can. Hopefully you have a sort of a value system that can have you sort of prioritize what's important. But hats off to everybody, whether they were asked to stay home, which created its own set of burdens, or they had to go to work every day, whether it's in an essential business or even in the hospital. So much respect for this, and really looking forward to the 4th of July. And I'll tell you why, because for a slight amount of time, some of the freedoms that we grew up with and we appreciated so much were kind of taken away. The freedom to move about, the freedom to go where we want. We were told to sit. Hopefully come 4th of July, we can all have a good celebration and be reminded of those things. So, that's what I'd say in closing, other than the fact I appreciate you taking the time to even ask these questions, Gustav and Dr. Harrison. Dr. Misra, sorry.
So thank you, Peter. Thank you very, very much for your kind time and wonderful advices. And I hope the viewers will like these discussions and take away some points and use it in their business and in their family life. And if you have any question for Peter, please feel free to connect with him. His email address on the left on the screen. And if you have any question for us or me and Dr. Harris, please, our email address is also on the right-hand side of the corner. So please feel free to connect with us. So I want to thank you again, and I want to thank you all the viewers. It's keep increasing over the past weeks. So thank you for your help, and thank you for helping others. And if you share this video with others, that will be great. And again, I just want to remind you that we are not alone. We are together in this, and we will get through this. Thank you very, very much. And from School of Business, CCSU.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.